Good morning, New Life Church. Or at least the part of New Life Church that can't be out of town on the long weekend. I know many of our churches up at Silver Bay right now. It's family camp weekend up there. They're having a great time. My wife, family, and I just back from a few weeks out of town. Anything interesting happened while I was away? Anything? Anything? That's the last time I leave. That's a lie. I'm going on holidays tomorrow, actually. It's Monday to Friday camping at Nudimic. Going to be a great week. Well, if you don't know me, my name is Rusty Hildebrand. I'm still lead pastor. I'm going to use that title for like another week until I get demoted to just pastor. But glad you're here this morning. Missed you guys a lot and been thinking of you, been praying for you. You know what? A few people have said to me, "Oh, you're going to be all alone." I said, "No, I'm not." And they said, "Well, yeah, I know. You've got the Holy Spirit." I said, "Yeah, but I got you." There's 400 of us or so. I'm excited about how God is just going to move us forward together as a church. And so I just want to tell you as a church that I am confident in God. Amen. You know what? We're 50 years in a New Life Church. And God has been with us, advancing this church for 50 years, and he ain't going to stop now. He's going to keep leading, and he's going to keep blessing, and he's the one with the plan. And I ain't confident in myself, but I'm confident in God that he's got this, right? I hope you're confident in God, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see where God is going to lead and what he's going to do. And it ain't going to be easy, but that's okay, because you know what? The easy thing and the really good thing often aren't the same thing. You ever figure that out in life, right? It ain't going to be easy, but God is moving us forward, and I'm excited to see what he has in store for us as his church. The easy thing and the great thing aren't often the same thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that this morning. Last Sunday, I listened to Andrew's message. It was a great message called Taking Care of Business, and you used a rock song as your intro. You're fired. You're fired. I'm giving you one more week, all right? And then you got to clean out. Taking care of business. Andrew, if you were here last week, continued our journey through the book of Proverbs, where we're just looking at various themes in the book of Proverbs. And last week talked about this really important theme we see there about laziness and hard work. And so Andrew would have used many of those proverbs on that topic that we find in the book, such as this one: "The craving of a sluggard will be the death of him, because his hands refuse to work." And this one: "As a door turns on its hinges, so a sluggard turns on his bed." I thought, get unhinged. That would be a great title for a sermon on that one, hey? Get unhinged. "A sluggard buries his hand in the dish, but he is too lazy to bring it back to his mouth." And so, as you look at those verses and much what Proverbs has to say on the area of work and laziness, you start to see that laziness often is equated with a lack of work, a little too much leisure in life. Laziness equals inactivity. And it certainly does. And that's often how we think of laziness. When I think of a lazy person, I normally picture someone, probably a millennial, let's be honest, right? You poor millennials. You get the brunt of every joke. Getting out of bed at noon, playing video games a few hours of the day when you should be looking for a job, maybe binge watching a whole season of your favorite show on Netflix through the weekend when you should be doing more productive things. Lazy. You probably know a lazy person, don't you? Right? Maybe you've got one in your house. Some of you were thinking, and maybe if you were here last week and you heard the message, some of you might have been thinking, I'm glad the lazy people in the room are hearing that. Because there's some people in here, they're lazy, and they need to hear that message. But that's not something I got to worry about, because I'm not lazy. I mean, geez, Pastor, if I could show you how busy my life is, if I could just show you my schedule, you will see that I am the opposite of lazy. I got too much going on. From morning till night, I'm running errands, work, chores at home, taking the kids to all their activities and everything else. I am busy. I'm not lazy. Oh, really? This morning, our treatment of this topic of laziness and work is going to be a two-parter. Because there's just been this one proverb that's just been eating away at me this week. And we're going to focus on kind of this one proverb we find here. We'll look at it here in a few minutes. But I wonder this morning if laziness is more than just inactivity, is more than just too much leisure. I wonder if it's deeper than that. I read an article a while back. It was titled, "The Greatest Struggle for a Pastor." So, of course, I got to read that. I'm always reading articles like that. And what would you think would be the greatest struggle of a pastor? Probably like me, you thought too much work. Right? I mean, you guys don't wonder what we're doing Monday to Friday. Right? And so I just thought it's going to be another one of those articles. I read lots of those articles. Too much work, workaholic, boundaries, all that good stuff. Right? No. So I read this article. I was kind of surprised to find it state that the greatest struggle of the common pastor is laziness. No, that's not possible, I thought. Certainly not my experience and those I know. Pastors work hard. And in fact, the article didn't claim they didn't. It went on to state that 90% of pastors report working 55 to 75 hours a week. They're busy. And yet it made the claim that you can be busy and you can be lazy. Bit of an eye-opener for me. And so this morning, I think one of the things I want to see is this. It's possible to be both hardworking and lazy at the same time. We'll unpack that a little bit. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, I think busyness can often be the way that we mask laziness in our lives. Solomon, who wrote much of the book of Proverbs, what does Solomon call the person who contrasts the sluggard? Who is the opposite of the sluggard? Any idea? As you've been reading through, hopefully each day, now this summer you've been reading the chapter of Proverbs that corresponds with that day. What does Solomon call the person who contrasts the sluggard? Here's a few examples. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. The lazy do not roast any game, but the diligent feed on the riches of the hunt. A sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. What does Solomon contrast the sluggard with? What are they called? The diligent. The diligent. In almost every instance. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to be diligent? I don't know what you think of when you hear that word, diligent. But for me, I tend to think of someone, a person who's on the lookout. They're alert. They're watchful. They're assessing. They're diligent. But I don't really know. That's kind of the first thought that came to my mind. So I went to the dictionary. I just Googled the definition of diligent. And if you do that, it defines diligent as showing conscientiousness in one's work. Don't you hate it? You go to find the definition of a word, and then it gives you a bigger word you understand less, right? Conscientiousness? I can't spell that. I'm not really sure what that means. So I had to go and I had to Google, what's the definition of conscientiousness? Well, conscientiousness is doing what is right. Doing what is right. Okay, so that's conscientiousness. And what does it mean to be diligent? It means having conscientiousness in one's work. So, as I kind of piece that together, and it kind of confirmed maybe some of what I sensed about what it means to be diligent. And this is what I just want to suggest to you. Diligence is discerning the right thing to do and then being undeterred in doing it. It's not just recognizing the right thing to do, but it always starts there. But it's more than that. It's in recognizing the right thing to do, the right work to do, being undeterred in doing that. That's what it means to be diligent. Now, I wonder if being diligent and being hardworking are the same thing, or if they're different. I don't know about you, but when I think of what contrasts lazy, I think hardworking. But maybe hardworking and diligent aren't exactly the same thing. I mean, hardworking is to work hard at something. Diligence is to work at the right thing hard. Okay? Diligence is no less than working at something hard, but it's more than that. It's working at the right thing, not just anything. I mean, you can see a guy, Bob, digging a hole, and you can watch Bob dig a hole all day, tirelessly, not taking any breaks, just giving it his best, digging that hole. And you go, man, Bob is a hard worker. And that might be true. But what does it mean to be diligent? It means to get up in the morning and to think, there are 8 things I could do. One of them is to dig a hole. But there are 7 other tasks I could do today. The diligence rightly assesses the best thing to do and then does it with all of their strength. Diligence isn't just working hard, it's working hard at the right thing. So what does it mean to not be lazy? It means to be diligent, not just hardworking. Because if you think the opposite of lazy is hardworking, then you're going to be one of those really busy, hardworking people, and you're going to assume that because you're hardworking, this is not an issue. This is not something you have to be concerned about. But what Solomon is saying, it's not about being hardworking, it's about being diligent. Knowing the right thing to do and then being undeterred in doing it. So I was thinking about that, and then I came to this proverb, Proverb 15:19, and I've just kind of been chewing on this proverb this week. It talks about thorns, and Andrew named his sermon after a classic rock song, Taking Care of Business, and so I thought I would do the same, okay? Every rose has its thorn, call this. And I was going to play it, but it's by a band named Poison. And if I played that in church, I mean, there's only one pastor left. You don't want that guy to get fired, right? Like, that would be bad. So we're not going to play Every Rose Has Its Thorn by Poison, but just Google to see what they look like, okay? All right, if they came into a church, God would be like, yeah, all right. This is what it says, Proverbs 15:19. The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. Now here you contrast the lazy person with the upright person. Normally it says diligent, but here I think Solomon's trying to say that the upright or the righteous person is diligent. That's a trait of a righteous person. A righteous person is diligent. The way of the sluggard is blocked with thorns, but the path of the upright is a highway. So I've been thinking on this and been kind of asking myself, in what way is the path of the lazy person blocked by thorns and the path of the diligent person a highway? And I think that there are 2 different ways that we can answer that question. I think there are 2 legitimate comparisons that Solomon is giving us here. And I don't know if he had one in mind or both in mind, but I think they're both true. There's 2 different ways to read this proverb that paint for us 2 important truths of what it means to be lazy and what it means to be diligent. And so I think the 2 comparisons that we see in this proverb, we see a different reality. The way of the sluggard and the way of the diligent present us with a different reality. A reality is the way things work, but then it's also comparing Alongside that, a different mentality, the mentality of the lazy person and the mentality of the diligent. The mentality is the way that we approach things, the way that we approach reality. So why is the lazy? So we're gonna look at those two comparisons, the different reality and the different mentality of a lazy person versus a diligent person. Why is the lazy person's path blocked by thorns? I think it's because the lazy person avoided doing what they ought to have been doing. And maybe this is what you first heard when you read this, when you heard this proverb. The lazy person didn't maintain his path. As the thorns were growing, he just didn't do his weeding. And after time, the path becomes overgrown with thistles and thorns, which blocks his way. Because he avoided doing the work that he needed to do. He neglected that. And now that he's come to a point where things have been made harder, his problems have grown. Because when you avoid facing a problem, the problem normally goes away, right? Haven't you noticed that? You know what? I've noticed that. If you don't shovel your driveway, by about supper time, your neighbor comes and snow blows it for you. It's this wonderful little thing I figured out. Normally, when you avoid a problem, the problem doesn't go away. When you sweep it under the rug, it doesn't go away. In fact, it grows, right? When you got some issues in your marriage and you just choose not to deal with them, they don't go away. They just get bigger. When you got that debt, that financial issue, and you just choose to kind of not open the envelopes, not just think about it, not deal with it, it only gets worse. When you avoid a problem, it grows bigger, and this is what we see here. He wasn't tending to his work, and I mean, I've experienced that literally with thorns. 3 summers now in our beautiful yard, and there were a few weeds when we got there, and wasn't really sure what to do with it, like what to use or who to call or whatever, and my neighbors, their yards are so nice, and they tend to them, and figure, well, next year I'll figure it out. I'll just busy myself with other things, and then next year there were more. I thought, really, this year I should deal with this. There's other things I could do. And so, and this year there's more. And it's almost gotten to the point where I'm like, do I just have to rip it all up and start from scratch? No, would that be the easiest thing to do? But what I've noticed in myself is that I often avoid a task that's the right thing to do by busying myself doing other things. You ever notice that? The lazy person avoids doing what they ought to do by doing a bunch of other good things. Maybe not the right thing, maybe not the best thing, but good things nonetheless. And as that happens, the thorns grow. We busy ourselves with the good at the expense of the great, we might say. The urgent instead of the important. You know, coming back to that article, why would it say if the average pastor works so many hours, why is his biggest problem laziness? And it's because it's tempting to not do the things that you ought to be doing that are best things to do. And maybe you know what this feels like. Man, there's that thing I really ought to deal with. Oh, that's going to be hard. That requires a lot of effort. You know what? Susan hasn't been in church I need to call Susan. Wonder what's up with Susan. Oh, I can find 1,000 really good things to do to fill 55 to 75 hours and avoid doing the important things that God is calling me to do. You ever notice that? We can fill our time with so many good things as a way, whether consciously or unconsciously, avoiding the work that is best, that God is asking us to do. In a sense, it's busying ourselves with a bunch of good things. It's a way of running away from the thing God is showing me that I need to do. Kind of like Jonah. Hey, I want you to go to Nineveh. How about Tarshish? I'll go to Tarshish. It's further. I'll hop on a boat. I'll go to Tarshish, and I'll tell the people Tarshish about you. I want you to go to Nineveh. We can run away from the thing we ought to be doing by filling our time, by becoming busy with just a host of other really good things. There was a man by the name of Jim Collins who wrote a well-known book called From Good to Great. And this is what he says. He says, the enemy of the great thing isn't the bad thing, it's the good thing. The good is the enemy of the great, because we can busy our lives so much with a whole bunch of good things as way of avoiding or neglecting the right thing, the important thing that we need to do. And Jesus just wouldn't do that. Jesus would never sacrifice the great for the good. In fact, you see at the very beginning of his ministry in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus arrives on the scene. Mark doesn't talk about his birth and all of that. He starts when Jesus enters ministry. It begins in Mark chapter 1. It says, Jesus went into Galilee proclaiming the good news of God. Repent and believe the good news. That's what Jesus came doing. And if you keep going through chapter 1 and into chapter 2, you find that Jesus is in these towns and he's preaching, but he's also healing. People are bringing sick and demon-possessed people to Jesus, and because he's kind and compassionate and has the ability and the will, he heals people and he casts out demons, and people are amazed by this, and they think this is great. And his reputation grows. And then this one day, Jesus is out in the countryside and he's praying, and his disciples come and they find Jesus and they say, Jesus, where were you? We're looking all over for you. The people in the town, they want you to come and they want you to heal. They want you to settle down here and keep doing what you're doing, healing, driving out demons, all of that good stuff. Everyone is looking for you. And Jesus replies, yeah, let's go somewhere else, to these nearby villages, so I can preach there too. For that is why I have come, Jesus says. Jesus knew what his mission was. He knew what the great thing was. And he would not sacrifice that thing by doing and busying himself with a whole bunch of other good things that he would be commended for by everybody around him. Jesus would not be deterred from doing the great. And this continues right up until the point when he hangs on the cross, right? There he is in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he knows what's coming, and he says, Father, if there's any way of taking this cup from me, please do, but not my will, your will be done. If this is the mission, then I'm even going to lay down my life for that. I'm not going to swerve to the left or to the right. I wonder if at that point he might have been tempted, or you might be tempted to go, you know what? I should go back there and just keep teaching and preaching. That'd be good too, wouldn't it? That'd be really good. But he knew the great thing. He knew his mission. And Jesus would not be deterred from that, because Jesus wasn't just hardworking. Jesus was diligent. He was diligent. He knew the best thing to do, and he would not be deterred from that. What about you? I guess this is a question that we'll need to ponder is, am I hardworking or am I diligent? Am I hardworking or am I diligent? We need to ask ourselves, is there any way that I'm busying myself with good things that's keeping me from doing the greater thing? And maybe I'm doing that on purpose to avoid something that's hard or unpleasant or seems bigger than what I can handle. Or maybe life just gets busy and your calendar fills up and you find yourself without time to do the greater thing. I want you to ask yourself, is there any way in which I'm busy with good things and avoiding the greater thing? I mean, maybe if you're a family here, and husband and wife, you got kids, maybe you're just so busy with your kids' activities, running around from one thing to the other thing, and you got 2 careers, and there's so much going on, but your marriage is withering. And maybe the people around you are going to commend you. You are such a good parent, and you are a good parent. But your life has become so busy with all these other good things that you may be sacrificing the greater thing. Maybe you're taking extra shifts at work to pay down the debt. Maybe to pay down the mortgage quicker, but in order to do that, you're sacrificing a greater thing. You're sacrificing time dedicated to your kids, investing in your kids, or investing time in nurturing and maintaining a relationship with God, because you're busy working hard at doing good things. Maybe you're involved in volunteering for many great charities or organizations, and you're so busy with all of those commitments that you can't really devote, as much as you would like to, you cannot devote adequate time to Christian community. The time that's required to build those deep, meaningful relationships. You know, I really encourage everyone into life group. And we're going to hear as the fall approaches more about life group. September 8th is our life group kickoff Sunday, and our groups will begin after that. And I really try to pitch life groups to people, and everyone thinks it's a good idea. Everyone. But life is busy. Just everything going on with the kids and this and that. I mean, that's great. And I got these other commitments. And I wonder if some of us aren't sacrificing the great for the good. I mean, I would say if your life is too busy for Christian community, I would go as far as to say this: if your life is too busy for life group, something like that, then you're too busy. Then you're too busy. You need to do the hard work. You need to be diligent. Diligent, which means seeing the right thing, the greater thing to do, and then doing what you need to do to make time, to do the hard work of figuring that out. You know, because the urgent, man, it's the enemy of the important. In this transition, you know, some in the months to come, it might be that God speaks to you. There's going to be lots of ways to help out, to step up. And it might be that God speaks to you. He's prompting you. There's something that he's stirring in you. And some of you are going to think immediately, but my life is so busy. Our lives can be so busy doing good things that we can avoid the greater things. So the question for us to ponder is, are we merely hardworking, or are we diligent? Are we diligent? The diligent person doesn't just work and work hard, but they do the right work. They don't avoid the hard, and they reap the reward. The path of the upright, the path of the diligent is a highway. They reap the reward of doing the right work. So that's one way to look at this. You know, the lazy person avoids doing the great thing by busying themselves with a bunch of good things. But the diligent person does the right thing, the right work, even if it's hard. There's another way to look at this proverb, not just as two different paths. I think there might be something else deeper going on here. Maybe the path of the sluggard and the path of the upright aren't two different paths. Maybe it's the same path that they see differently. That would be another way to read this. The sluggard sees the path and he sees that it's full of thorns and he's blocked. The diligent sees the same path, and what he sees, it is to him a highway. I think Solomon might be talking about the different mentality, the different attitude that the diligent and the lazy bring to life. The lazy man just sees thorns, which I guess in this case would represent whatever's hard. I mean, thorns are painful. The thorns represent the hardships of the path that come with the great work. Right? Every rose has its thorn. Every good thing, the great things are usually the hard things. The lazy person is deterred by the thorns. That person sees, Solomon says, they only see danger, they see pitfalls, they see what could happen if they tried to go down that path. The future is bleak to them. And so they're blocked not really by the thorns at all. They're blocked by their attitude. And what is that attitude? I think that attitude is fear. They're blocked by fear of the thorns, fear of the hardship and effort required, fear of failure, fear of stepping out of what they're comfortable with and know into the unknown where I have to let go of control. They're blocked by, not by the thorns, but by fear. In fact, if you go to this Proverb 22:13, which says, the sluggard says, there is a lion outside, I'll be killed in the public square. You've read that before, and if you're like me, you've thought, this guy, he's just making up stories. Like, really, there's a lion outside. That's what you're going for? You've run out of every other excuse. You're just really scrap that bit. Sometimes my mouth goes faster than my brain. You ever notice that? Is that happening to you? Scraping the bottom of the barrel here with your excuses. There's almost kind of like he's crying wolf, but like crying lion. Come on. What a lame. And the more I've thought about that, I thought, I don't think that's what's happening. I mean, this was written in a context where there were lions outside. There are lions. I mean, if my kid said, Dad, I would go outside and mow the lawn, but there's a lion outside. Like, come on, that's lame. That's pretty lame. But here, I mean, this is the part of the world, there are lions outside. I don't think he's making that up, but look what he says. I'll be killed in the public square. Yes, he recognizes something that is true, the potential danger, but how does he respond to that? Fear of the worst thing that could happen. I'll be killed in the public square where there's all those other people. The lion's going to find me and kill me. So he recognizes the hardship, maybe even the danger, and he responds with an attitude of fear. It'll kill me. This is the fear of attempting the great thing, the right thing. The fear of not trying to work on your marriage because you're just not sure that if you do that it's going to work, and it might make things worse, and it might just not work out, and that might be the end of it. Better just to settle. Better just to stick with the status quo. The failure of attempting that task, you haven't done that before, and you're not sure that you can actually do that or persevere in that. Better to stay in the boat where you can't drown. It's an attitude of fear that blocks this person. Better stick to good things. Where does that come from? Where does that fear come from? I think that fear comes from misunderstanding the character of God. And I think this is where it gets important. Misunderstanding the character of God. In fact, if you go to one of those stories of Jesus, a parable we find in Matthew chapter 25, well-known parable, the parable of the talents. Remember this story? The master's going on this long journey, and he has 3 different servants, and he entrusts some of his wealth to his servants. To the one servant, he gives 5 bags of gold. To a second servant, he gives 2 bags of gold. To the third servant, he gives 1 bag of gold, and he says, handle it while I'm gone for me. And so then maybe you know how the story goes, right? The one servant, he invests it, and he gets a return on what he invested, 5 more. The other one invests it, and he gets a return on that investment. And then the master comes back, and he talks with each one. He comes to this third servant who he gave a bag of gold to. And that servant, the one who received 1 bag of gold came, and this is what it says. Master, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the field. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. So you know that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? He calls this servant lazy. I think there's something interesting here if we kind of work backwards. This guy is lazy. Why? Because he was afraid. He was afraid to act. Why? Because he thought his master was a hard man. You see that? Lazy, because he's afraid, because he thought his master was a hard man. And the master comes and he says, so you think you know the sort of guy I am? He says, you got me all wrong. What we're supposed to see here is his master's not a hard man at all. He's not a thief. He's not harvesting where he hasn't sown. But this one servant has a wrong perception of the character of his master, and because he misunderstands his master's character, he's afraid, and so he's deterred from doing the good thing, the right thing. He's afraid. Fear imprisons us in our circumstances. Fear blocks our way. How did the master describe the other two servants? Do you remember? What did he call them? He called this guy wicked and lazy. What did he call the other guys? Good and faithful. You are good and faithful. The others were full of faith. This guy had fear, but the other two had faith. Faith in their master. The path of the diligent is a highway to him, not because his path is easy and doesn't have thorns. It's the exact same path the other guy saw, but where the other guy saw fear and was blocked by fear of the thorns and the hardship, this guy has a totally different attitude, the diligent. When he sees the path, he sees the opportunity. He's optimistic. He embraces the future. He sees the path as a highway. Yes, the thorns are there, but he's not afraid. He's full of faith. Why is he full of faith? Because he knows the character of his God. He knows that every rose has its thorn. It ain't going to be easy. It's going to be hard. There are perils, there are dangers, but everything of significance has its challenges. But the diligent face the path with faith and optimism. They are undeterred. They persevere. And it's not because they don't have fear, but it's because they press through that fear because they have faith. They press through the fear because they have faith and they know their God. And so this is what Paul says in Romans 8, 31, 32. He says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also along with him graciously give us all things? You see what he was saying? These are my favorite verses because this talks about the character of God. Church, God is for you. God is not against you. He's for you. The divine all-powerful one is for you. And what Paul is saying is if he has come, if Jesus has come and he's died on the cross for you, why would he withhold anything that you need to do what he's calling you to do the great thing? That doesn't make any sense. God is for you. This is the character of our God. Our God is with us. He is for us. He provides for us. And whatever he calls us into, he will provide for us in, and he will bring us through. And when we stumble, he forgives us. Right? The next verse says, and who is it that condemns you? No one. Even when you fall short and you stumble, he forgives you. Gives you another chance. This is our God. So I think this statement is just so important. This is where diligence comes from. Confidence in God's character gives us courage to follow God's call and face life's challenges. What's the key? What's the key to do the great thing? What's the key to diligence? It's confidence, resolute confidence in the character of God. Because when you know God as he is, from that comes the courage to follow God's call and to face whatever challenges come with that. So I'm convinced that the root of much of our busyness is maybe laziness. So you might be hardworking, and that's great. But again, are you hardworking or are you diligent? Are you diligent? I might have told the story before, but there's great insights that come from gardening radio on CBC Radio 1. There's some great insights that come from gardening talk radio. But I remember years ago hearing this expert in gardening talk about what people do wrong when they buy plants and bring them home to plant them. Now, Eric and I, a few weeks ago, we went to the nursery, to the greenhouse, and we got some new plants to put in our front. And they come in a little pot, and you have to transplant them from the pot into the ground. And he said, people normally transplant them wrong. He said, normally what people do is they grab them by the stem. Why? Because the stem seems like the strongest part. They grab them by the stem, they squeeze the stem, and they pull it out of the pot, and then they plop it in the ground. He said, you should never grab it by the stem. You should always transplant that flower, whatever it is, by the leaves. Always grab it by the leaves. Now, people don't want to grab it by the leaves because they think, well, some of the leaves are going to come off. They'll break off. And he says, that's true. Often some of those leaves do come off, but that's okay, because you know what happens with leaves? They grow back. But you know what happens when you crush a stem? The plant dies. He says, never squeeze the stem. Pull it by the leaves, and even if a few break off, that's okay, because they'll grow back. Petals are great, but they're not as important as the stem. And that kind of came back to me, and I thought, you know what, sometimes some things in our life are petals, and some things in our life are stems. And I need to ask myself, am I, in all of the busyness and all the work I do, with all the demands of life, am I squeezing a stem for the sake of the petals? So some of those petals don't fall off. Am I squeezing the stem, the thing through which the life flows to the plant, for the sake of the petals? Maybe another way of asking that question is this, and this is the question I leave with you. Is your busyness, I know many of us are very busy, life is busy, we work hard. Is your busyness with good things keeping you from the great thing? Is your busyness with good things keeping you from the great thing? Maybe intentionally. Maybe if you're honest, maybe all that stuff in your life is a way of avoiding that thing, that great thing that needs to happen, that needs attention. But boy, if I can just fill my time with all these good things, then maybe I can avoid that thing. Or maybe it's unintentional. Maybe life just happens and it gets busy and we get out of control and we need to be, and we're working hard, but maybe we're not diligent. Maybe we're not aware and watchful, assessing what we really need to be about and do what we need to do the great thing, to not squeeze the stem. So I want to invite you into just a short time of prayer here as we bring this to a close. And this is the question I want you to put before God. Feel free, if you want to bow your head and close your eyes. Just all of us can take a moment here to pray before we close with some worship. I just put this question before God. God, is there any busyness in my life, doing a bunch of good things that's keeping me from doing the better thing that you want me to be doing, that I need to be doing? God, is there any stem in my life that I'm squeezing for the sake of some petals? Just ask God to show you. How do you need to be diligent? Maybe you want to take a moment and just confess your faith again in God. Say, God, you are a great God. You are God lacking in no power, no goodness. I just trust in your character, God. I trust that you're going to provide everything I need to do what you're asking me to do. Just tell God you trust him. God, we thank you that you have revealed yourself. We know who you are. We don't have to wonder. You have revealed yourself through your son, Jesus. He came and he took on flesh, and he lived an undeterred life. He was not content with the good things that he could have done, become a resident teacher in some town. He knew his mission. He knew his mission was the cross, to save us from our sin, to save us for the life that we could have through you, that you created us to have. We just thank you that Jesus went to that cross and he was undeterred and he did your will perfectly to make a way for us to have that life. And Lord, in Jesus, we just see who you are, God. We see that you love us, that you are for us, you are not against us, that whatever you call us into, whether it be hard, whether there be thorns, whether it seems beyond us, you will provide everything that we need to do what you call us to do. Lord, that's the sort of God you are. Just give us the faith that we need as we go from here, as we go back into our week. Lord, give us the faith that we need to do the right work, the work that you're calling us to do. Lord, just to let go of whatever good things that might be filling our time for the sake of doing the great thing. Lord, show us what that looks like in our lives, for our good and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.